And when I first read it, I thought, well, I don't think that's right. I think that's ungrammatical. And then I wanted to put it in the sermon. I thought, well, my wife, Kristen, who's an English major at the highest degree of caliber, hears that. She's going to say, you misspoke. The phrase is love greatly. Love greatly. At first here, it's like, I think that, are we supposed to say love greatly? Love greatly. It means to love more than the usual amount. Love greatly. You'll hear it again. Love greatly. So Jesus offers a well-known, tiny little parable in this gospel scene here. A grain of wheat, he says, has to fall into the earth and die in order for it to live, bloom, and bear fruit. You got to die to live. Now in this parable, the fruit is something where there was previously nothing. It's happening in our yards right now. I mean, was it this time last week? There was nothing in that front bed in front of my house, and now look at the tulips. Emerging as something where previously there was nothing. Now this parable of the grain of wheat is a foreshadowing of the love that will be born from the emptiness, the nothingness of the cross. And it is a model for the unusual love that we are all called to imitate. It reminds me of a little story about the 16th century Spanish mystic, St. John of the Cross. John of the Cross was in the day where letters were a primary means of communication, and John of the Cross wrote many, many letters. He was helping Teresa of Avila to raise up convents full of nuns in this sort of Reformation period. And in November of 1591, about a month before John died, he wrote his last letter. It was a letter to a nun who was having trouble getting along with the sisters in her convent. Some of them were speaking ill of this woman to whom John wrote. So our troubles with gossip and backstabbing are not new. They've been around for a while. This was John of the Cross's advice to this nun. He wrote to her, "Love greatly those who speak against you and do not love you. Because in this way, by loving greatly, love will come to birth in a heart that has none. That is what God does with us," wrote John of the Cross. Now mind what he doesn't say. Like he doesn't say, "Oh, sister, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you." He doesn't say, "Don't mind the naysayers. Ignore them. Just keep your head down and say your prayers. Keep to yourself around people who don't like you, don't love you, say bad things about you." That's not what John says. He says, "Love greatly those who do not love you. Love them more than you would usually love anyone. Love greatly. That is, love likely to be needed is that my tight-fisted grip on the way things ought to be, darn it, has to fall to the earth and die. Now, John of the Cross's teaching, while rigorous and challenging, and not something I really like all that much, is not all that unusual. It's sort of what you expect from a follower of Jesus, especially a guy named St. John of the Cross. That is, it's usual until you get to the second half of it. You don't catch the second piece of his advice to the nun. He said, love greatly, because in this way, love will come to birth in a heart that has none. That is, love greatly so that something will grow up, will be born in a place where there was previously nothing. So love greatly the one who is striving against you and who does not love you, so that love will come to be in their heart, where previously it was not. So I was thinking, okay, put this on the street, put this on the street, put this on the street. And I thought of something I've heard that women who are pregnant sometimes say. When they say at a meal, I'm eating for two. And they are, right? They're literally, a woman with child is literally eating for two. Oh yeah, bring it. Keep it coming, I'm eating for two. You know? John is saying, sometimes we have to love for two. When someone is striving against me, does not love me, is not sending love my way, I am called by John of the Cross to love for two. So to recap this outlandish teaching that I do not like, I'm going to go on record, I do not like this teaching. If you don't love me, then what John is saying is that I must love you greatly. That is, way more than the usual amount, so that my love can supply love to both your empty heart and my broken heart. You know, a lot of people have to love me greatly, because sometimes I'm emptied out. This is what Jesus means when he says we must die to live. Love greatly. That is more than the usual amount. To which I say, oh my, Christianity is not for the faint of heart. This is a high calling, a rigorous challenge, from whom many turn and go the other way. I was reminded of a story of a woman who loved greatly. This is the story of a man who was married to a woman, and the man did something terrible that harmed their marriage and devastated the woman. I'm not going to tell you what he did because it would get us off track, but I'll ask this simple question. Do not answer or raise your hands. Have you ever done something terrible that broke a relationship? That is what the man did. What you're thinking of, that's what he did. Early one evening, shortly after the terrible thing was done, the man and the woman, husband and wife, were together in the kitchen of their home. And the woman stood with her back to her husband, unloading the dishwasher. And the room was blanketed in a burdensome, heavy silence, except for the occasional clinking of dishes as the woman put plates and cups away in the cabinets. While she unloaded the dishwasher, the man, her husband, sat at the kitchen table in that same space, in the dim light of the fading day. And the man stared straight ahead, and his hands rested sort of oddly, he thought, looking back, palms down, on the hard wood of the table top in their kitchen where they'd shared many meals over many years. And the man's eyes, as he the second hand ticked smoothly around in an unrelenting circle as time marched on. His mind ached as he dug slowly through the last few days and weeks, searching in his memory for the precise moment when it had all gone wrong and he'd done the terrible thing. And the man wanted to speak. He wanted to say something to his wife who was working there, but more than anything, the man didn't want the difficulty between them to deepen even more. And he feared. This icy fear gripped him. He feared that his words would only worsen things. Certain that he wouldn't be able to say the right thing, the man withdrew deeper and deeper into himself. He felt the cells in his body shrink and constrict. And when he told the story back years later, he said that there was a point as he was sitting at that table that he actually felt his heart empty out and become a cavern in his chest in which there was nothing. At this point, the man thought he might die or at least pass smooth out. As she put the dishes in the cabinet, the woman was sad and she was outraged. She wanted to throw the dishes one by one through the window in the kitchen into the backyard. She wanted to curl up on the floor. She wanted the man to stand up and do better. She wanted to travel back in time and change everything about their lives. But she knew that he couldn't speak. She knew that her husband was helpless to say anything, much less the right thing. When she told the story back years later, she said there was a moment, like this flowing, fluid moment in the midst of that dark evening, when she just knew that the man was emptied out. The cavern with nothing. The walls of which were painted with regret and shame. And she knew in that moment, the woman said, that her dream of the way things would be had to fall into the earth and die. And she looked up at the clock hanging by the door. Then she turned to her husband, sitting there at the kitchen table. He was stock still, frozen. And she opened her mouth to speak, and this is what she said. I cannot undo what you've done, and I know that you cannot either. I don't know why you did it, but I do know. I believe that you regret it. And at this, the man closed his eyes against the tears that welled up like a river overflowing his banks. His wife continued, you dragged the two of us down into this deep, dark ditch. I'll keep on loving you, she said. It's all there is to do. And my love will have to be enough for the two of us. I'll love for two. When the man told the story back many, many years later, he described that moment as his death, and the days following as his birth. A rebirth, a true conversion. And he said that to that point, when his wife said, "I'll love for two," he had no idea. Oh, he thought he did. But he had no idea what love really was. And her love that night, he said, was not a sweet, tender love. It was not the love of newlyweds or honeymoon. No. She was not a victim, he said, shouldering the weight of my sins. Her love that night was a fierce animal strength that would lead them through a storm, up a steep, impossible mountain, in a pitch black night. It would kill her so they could both live. It was an unusual, great love, he said, that poured love slowly back into my own cavernous, broken heart. The man and the woman lived a long time after that dark night, in which she loved greatly, that is more than the usual amount for the both of them. She carted off to heaven first. And when the man buried his wife, he told the folks gathered at her grave that her love, the love of God, he said, pouring through her, her love had saved them in a time when her love was their only possession, all that they had. He said everything that came of our lives that was any good was because of her love. She loved for two. She loved for two. Followers of Jesus love greatly. That is more than the usual amount. So that love can be born in hearts where there is none. In hearts that have been emptied out. This is what God has done for us. Making it possible